This is a family story of two knives and two young men. Your grandfather, my father, Bill Rutherford, in 1917 would have been 19 years old. And he and his young friend, same age, I think they were school buddies, went off to explore the world and bummed their way across the United States, working in various construction projects. I think they even worked in the mines in Virginia City, Nevada. Anyway, they wound up eventually working for the Santa Fe Railroad in Richmond, California, in the locomotive repair shops or the mechanical repair shop. Anyway, they were both avid hunters and fishermen, and apparently needed hunting knives. So they found two old worn out flat files, big flat files, and made a friendship with the local blacksmith. I'm sure there were many blacksmiths in a railroad shop. Anyway, this one agreed to take these two files and retemper them and make them into steel that you could use as a knife without being as brittle as a file. So this is what they did. Then 3 years later, they were back in Colorado, and they were working for the Empire Zinc Company at a company town called Gilman, which no longer exists. Anyway, it's on Highway 24 between Minturn and Leadville, up near Tennessee Pass. And it's in the Eagle River Valley. And they were out fishing, which they did more of than anything else, and camping out. And they had these two knives. And they were practicing, like most young guys, they're going to learn how to throw a knife. And so they were indulging themselves in throwing these knives. Well, this was my dad's, and this was his friend's. And that knife hit a rock or something, and as you can see, broke. So they decided to take a hatchet or a rock or something, and they drove this one into one pine tree clear up to the hilt, and they drove the broken tip into another pine tree, as you can see, and left it there. Well, many, many years later, this knife continued in the family. In fact, I used it myself as my hunting knife as a kid, until I bought one that was a little easier to hold on to. But it will hold a fine edge because it's very hard steel. Anyway, in 1964, 20, 30, 40, 46 years later, my dad would have then been 66 years old, I guess, or 68. Yeah. Decided that he ought to go see if that knife could still be there. They were at a lake called Whitney Lake. And at the time they were there, it was a tough horseback trip to the lake. Now you can drive a Jeep to the lake, but you got a good Jeep. It's still a rough road. But fortunately, the Jeep road comes into the other end of the lake from where they were camped. And Dad had an uncanny sense of knowing exactly where he was at all times. And so he and my oldest brother, your Uncle Bill, and Bert, his son, made a camping trip. I think they drove partway and then hiked the rest of the way up to Whitney Lake. And Dad went to where they had camped 6 years earlier. And by golly, these were still stuck in the trees. These were lodgepole pine, and both trees were dead, but they were still standing. So they pulled this one out of the tree and cut this one out and left a piece of the wood on the knife. And there it is. So these knives are now almost 100 years old. They were made in 1917, and there they are. Okay. The sheath for this one that we've had in the family was made out of the top of an old boot, so it's probably more than 100 years old. And as you can see, it shows it. Okay. I've had it all these years and decided to mount it on a piece of good old timberline wood. And just as a side interest, these look like weird horseshoes, but what they really are oxen shoes. They did shoe oxen when they used them in the mountains because their hoofs would wear out just like a horse's, you know. So I just put them all on this old board, and there we are. So that's your Grandpa Bill Rutherford's story. And I'm very proud to have these. They'll pass on. I asked Bert if he wanted them, since he's the one who actually is in the picture showing this still stuck in the tree, and he's holding this one up against it. But he said he didn't want a picture. So you and Frank can flip for this, okay? That's the end of my story.
There you go.
There we go.
Very good.
This will hold a very good edge. Oh, if you want to, there is an extra, just to show you how tough this knife was.
Sure. Yeah.
During the war years, steel was hard to come by, and after the war, even more so. And we were trying to butcher an elk one time, and the hatchet that we were using was a post-war hatchet, probably made out of scrap steel. Anyway, it wasn't doing very well, so we took this knife and literally drove it down through the backbone of the elk, and that's why these chips are in the back of it. But it never broke. So it's butchered many elk. When Dad used it, he called it his old rifle, his 300 Savage was Gitsum, and this was Gutsum. Okay. That's it. Now you know the story of the knives.